At ComEd.com/clean.
Think Theory Radio.
We enter this world of hyper-reality. In case you didn't know, hyper-reality is the inability of consciousness to distinguish reality from a simulation of reality, especially in technologically advanced societies. The action of hyper-reality is to desire reality in an attempt to achieve that desire to fabricate a false reality that is to be consumed as real.
Think Theory Radio with Damian Perdue. Saturdays at 6 p.m. on WCPT 820.
This is a WCPT Veteran Minute. When Pearl Harbor was attacked, men of all races across the country volunteered to join the fight, despite the United States Army being heavily segregated. Black enlistees were mostly assigned to combat support roles. But this did not stop Lieutenant Colonel Paul L. Bates, who knew of the racism and pushed his soldiers to achieve excellence. The 761st Tank Battalion was formed in the spring of 1942. It contained 30 black officers, 6 white officers, and 676 enlisted men. The unit donned the nickname the Black Panthers, wearing patches on their uniforms with a panther on it and the slogan, "Come Out Fighting." And in 1944, the 761st was assigned to General George Patton's Third Army in France. General Patton gave a colorful speech to his crew, and the Black Panthers became the first African-American tank squad in World War II. And by the end of the war, the Black Panthers had fought further east than every other United States unit, receiving 391 decorations for their heroism.
Hey Google, play WCPT.
Streaming Chicago's progressive talk from TuneIn.
The following program, Collaboraction Radio, is sponsored by Collaboraction, and to the extent applicable, their guests. The views and opinions expressed therein do not necessarily reflect those of Heartland Signal, LLC, or its management.
Hello, and welcome to Collaboraction Radio at the intersection of art, activism, and social change. That was the sound of the incredible DJ Lady D, a Chicago house legend and also board president of Collaboraction. Thank you for joining us at Collaboraction Radio on WCPT 820 AM, Chicago's progressive talk radio, and also streaming live on Facebook, WCPT.com, YouTube, and available on demand on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and everywhere else you get your digital stuff. I am Beverly Dines.
And I am Anthony Mosley. Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Collaboraction is a 27-year-old nonprofit. Our mission is to build knowledge, empathy, dialogue, and action. We call it KEDA, around oppression and inequity. And we do that through live theater and stories, film, radio, to leverage the power of storytelling and community to cultivate positive social change.
Positive social change.
Positively.
Collaboraction Radio is sponsored by the Joseph and Bessie Feinberg Foundation. Today's episode of Collaboraction Radio is sponsored by AV Chicago, Chicago's leading provider of AV production and event management services, and Ethos Collective. Ethos Event Collective is a purpose-driven destination and events management company that seeks to become a trusted, strategic ally to your business as we delight your audience and generate impactful outcomes. Visit ethoseventcollective.com to learn more and schedule a meeting with their team. After our show today, if you feel impassioned about what we're doing and want to join in on the conversation for any of our programming, Collaboraction Radio is made possible by donors and members like you. So please email us at radio@collaboraction.org or go to www.collaboraction.org to learn more.
Yeah, do it. It's June 15th.
It's June 15th.
And first, just give a shout out to my mom. 42 years ago, she brought my little brother into the world.
Wow.
My brother doesn't say it's not his birthday, it's his mom's day of birth. And so Mark Mosley, wherever you are, and I think you're down in Florida somewhere, happy birthday, brother. I love you. And thanks, Mom. Collaboraction has got some stuff going on, everybody. We have our House of Belonging event coming up July 19th. That's our radically inclusive party at the Epiphany Center for the Arts, and we'll be featuring the Sandra Delgado Experience. Get your tickets now. I think if you use the code SUMMER, all caps, before like next week, you get 20% off. So just do that too. And then our youth are going to be touring the parks July 25th, 26th, and 27th. They're called The Light, and they light up the world with their work. They are artivists. And they'll be at Austin Town Hall on the 25th. And Loyola Park and Rogers Park on the beach. Bring your beach stuff on the 26th, and at the amazing Hamilton Park in Englewood on July 27th. And if you want a preview, you can go to the Navy Pier on July 11th. They're part of Fresh Fest at 2 o'clock, and they are amazing. They're led by Pinky Ring, the incredible hip-hop artist, ambassador, educator.
Icon.
The Boricua hip-hop. She was the Chicago Reader 2022 Hip-Hop Artist of the Year, which is amazing. And she's teaching our young people in our program. So, come out and see The Light. And if you have teenagers or tweens even, bring them out. It's a family affair, and they can kind of watch our young people kind of sharing work around their individual social change issues. And then August 23rd at Millennium Park in Pritzker Pavilion, Collaboration and Teatro Vista will be presenting La Habana Madrid by Sandra Delgado. The play with music about a real live salsa Latin jazz club in the 60s, where Latinx immigrants found a refuge to hear the music from their home countries and escape the brutal racism and immigration officials of the 60s. And we bring that club back to life at Millennium Park for one night only. So bring the whole family. And then also, I would be remiss if I didn't let everybody know once again that we are building a new House of Belonging in the Kimball Art Center at 1757 North Kimball. It's going to be a space where we gather to do what we do, tell stories, learn from each other, grow towards each other. And it's going to have theater and storytelling, and we might even do a radio show there eventually. And we can't wait. And we're trying to raise a lot of money so we can do it right. So go to our website to learn more, or check us out on social media. We have a great video. It has drone footage and a bunch of highlights about what we're going to manifest over there in Humboldt Park. And on our next episode of Collaboration Radio, we have the hosts of Ergo, which is like a really great podcast about our collective liberation, Damon and Jason. And so we're going to have it's going to be very meta, be a fractal, be like a podcast hosting a podcast and talking about podcasts. And actually today's guest has a lot of experience on the radio and podcasting and writing and teaching writing. So we're going to have to be on our top of our game today, Beverly.
Prepared.
A lot is a lot. I don't know if I'd say all that.
Oh, come on. What? You would say what?
A lot, I'd say a little something.
A little something, something?
A little something, yeah.
Oh, that's Arionne Nettles. She's in the studio. We're going to be talking with her in just a moment. And if you want to call it, we are live. You may be listening to us live in your radio or in your garage or in your office. Well, hi.
Hi.
It's Collaboration Radio. We're here. Thanks for listening. And you can call in. We're going to be talking about some really important, cool things about Chicago history today. And if you want to call in, you can do that. 773-763-9278. That's the jingle that I put Beverly on the spot to create last week. And she did. And now we have a jingle. It's just that easy, folks. Reality can be, it can be shaped in the moment. And I'm not going to go on an improv tangent right now to prove that. But if you want to call in, you can actually change your reality, and you could be on the radio live with Beverly, Arionne, and I. So that's 773-763-9278. If you have a question or anything you want to share with us, the lines are open.
Last week, we celebrated 1 year of Collaboration Radio, which is so exciting.
Happy birthday to us. Or as they say, happy birthday to us.
Happy birthday.
Anyway, in our second year, we are bringing new programming that will continue to dynamically address social change with the community. Today is the first episode of KEDA Conversations, a new program utilizing Collaboraction's mission towards knowledge, empathy, dialogue, and action, or KEDA, to have meaningful conversations with community members on critical issues.
And for our inaugural episode, we're joined by Arionne Nettles. Arionne is the author of We Are the Culture, Black Chicago's Influence on Everything. Her new book takes readers through the history of how Black Chicagoans have led pop culture in America for decades, and gives insights into the way culture spreads and influences our lives. Arionne is a lecturer and director of audio journalism programming at Northwestern University's Medill School of Journalism, Media, Integrated Marketing Communications. As a culture reporter in print and audio, her stories often look into Chicago history, culture, gun violence, policing, and race and class disparities. As a contributor to the New York Times Opinion, Chicago Reader, The Trace, Medium's Zora, and Momentum, Chicago PBS station WTTW, and NPR affiliate WBEZ. She also is host of Is That True?, a kids podcast about facts. Arionne was recently deputy editor at nonprofit civic media organization City Bureau, and worked as a digital producer at WBEZ, where she ran the daily digital desk. Prior to joining WBEZ team, Nettles was a multi-platform editor at the Associated Press, where she edited stories for AP's 14-state Central Region, breaking news online and on social platforms. She's also worked as a digital managing editor of the Chicago Defender, one of the nation's oldest black newspapers, and as a freelance reporter before pivoting to full-time journalism. Nettles obtained Bachelor and Master of Business Administration degrees from Florida A&M University and a Master of Science in Journalism degree from Medill, where she received the Harrington Award for magazine writing and editing. Nettles is a proud member of the National Association of Black Journalists and works to teach Chicago area teens the power of words through her organization, Write Chicago. And it's, quote, sicker than your average writing workshops. For more, visit Arionne.com. That's ARONNE.com. Welcome to Collaboration Radio, Arionne.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for being here. We're so excited. And I think, for those who are listening, we are giving away 2 of Arionne's books to those who want to collaborate and be part of the conversation. We have, and we'll also be purchasing the book to build out our KEDA library and our new Office of Belonging that will hopefully be coming soon as well in the Kemble Art Center. And so if you're interested also in walking away with some knowledge of your own, please call in. So the first tenet of KEDA is K for knowledge. And so as we open the dialogue with Arionne, with the following data, I want to make sure we have, as an interesting backdrop for those who are listening. So in 1905, the Chicago Defender was founded by Robert S. Abbott, and it is one of the oldest Black publications founded right here in the city, and was a prominent African-American newspaper that played a crucial role in encouraging the Great Migration and advocating for civil rights. We're going to come back to the Chicago Defender in a moment. From 1910 to 1920, known as and even onwards to even the 70s, really that period is known as the Great Migration, where over 500,000, and even more than that, some data that I saw says millions, honestly.
Yeah.
African Americans moved from the South to the Black Belt, but really what it became was the gorgeous Bronzeville neighborhood and the neighborhood surrounding that. And if you continue on in 1929, for those of you who love the Bud Billiken Parade as much as I do, that was founded here and is still the largest African American parade in the U.S., celebrating back to school education, literacy, with major partners who have joined up again to celebrate back to school and the critical need for education. In 1955, remember I mentioned the Chicago Defender. It is through the Chicago Defender that Mamie Till told the world about what happened to her son Emmett Till, which set in motion what many consider the beginning of the civil rights movement as we know it today, and which would ever change the history of America. Between the 1950s and the 1960s, your favorite blues, jazz, soul artists came to Chicago for inspiration. Gospel, so Mahalia Jackson, Muddy Waters, Willie Dixon, Etta James, and so many more came to Chicago to collaborate and to be inspired. In the 1970s, Soul Train graced the screens of millions of Americans across the country as they learned the latest trends from dancers and artists on stages here right in Chicago. And during that period, Chaka Khan, who's based in Chicago, Minnie Riperton, who's from here as well, Donny Hathaway, and many more as well. In the 1980s, if you like house music, based here. Founded here in Chicago by Black artists. African-American DJs, notably Frankie Knuckles, known as the godfather of house, started it here. And then, are any of you wearing a pair of Jordans? Are you wearing a pair of Jordans? Do you have a pair of Jordans? Maybe you should get some. Pretty popular. I've heard they're pretty popular. And why is that? In the 1990s, Michael Jordan shot to stardom, leading the Chicago Bulls to 6 championships. We don't talk about the baseball. And in 1991, a law student would go on to accept his acceptance to the University of Chicago Law, which would then set in motion him becoming the first Black president of the United States of America. I wonder what his name is. And so, Arionne, as you think about all of these facts and others, what was your process in uncovering the history that built the foundation for your book, and walk us through kind of that journey of starting to dig through some of these cultural milestones that were founded here?
Yeah. So the first iteration of the book, like the first title, was that the subtitle was about Black Chicago's contribution to popular culture. So the first time, I'm outlining it first, and I'm trying to focus really on music and film and all those things. And things just started to really blur, right? Because how can you talk about the blues without talking about the Great Migration? How can you talk about the Great Migration without talking about the Chicago Defender, right? So all these things are kind of entangled. And so it really ended up being where I said, okay, I am picking these subjects that I think are really important and that kind of help tell the story, that are kind of like emblematic of all of the great contributions. But I'm also acknowledging that this cannot possibly be everything. Like, it is just truly impossible to explain everything in a book. So I am just going to try to explain or to choose certain stories that I think can kind of be a really good example, right? So I'll choose something and I'll say, okay, well, honestly, this book could even just be a music book. Like you mentioned blues and, gospel and, of course, today we may think of gospel as a little bit more traditional, but especially at its inception, right? Like what we know as gospel was really seen as like a modern type music. A lot of people were kind of like, what's that music you're trying to get us to listen to? Church music isn't supposed to sound like that, right? So it was just kind of, the same things people said about blues and jazz and rock and roll, they said about gospel. And so many of those things tie here, and I'm like, I could literally have a book that's just on the music, and it'd be still not enough. So I tried to do something I thought was maybe balanced, and just really, what could be the example? What could help me tell the story? So you're always trying to figure out what could help me sell my point. If my point is that I am telling you, if you pick up this book and you're not from Chicago, that Chicago has influenced everything, how can I convince you? And so that was kind of how I tried to, I guess, teach through the book. But I did a lot of change and I did a lot of switching around. But I guess I did try to make it feel like good examples and it be like a little of everything, right? Because what if what if you get to one section and you're like, I'm kind of maybe not normally interested in this, but I am really interested in this, and I'm not really interested in, So I wanted to feel kind of like it's touching a lot of different things, because I think that's also how we encounter the world, right? Like we, even if we're not like quote unquote sports people, like you could not get away from the Bulls of the 90s, right? Like there's people selling T-shirts at every stop corner. There is, people really having a pride, right? So it's like, yes, but you don't have to necessarily be a quote unquote sports person. You may not have to be necessarily a makeup person to appreciate what like a company like Fashion Fair could have an influence. So I tried to really make it feel kind of widespread, which was a lot harder than I thought it was going to be. I thought it was going to be, I'm not going to lie, I thought this was going to be an easier task than it was. I definitely had a very rude awakening when I realized how tough it really was to go so wide. And
you also took a dynamic approach with weaving in your own story into the chapters as well, even from when the book opens to your grandmother coming here in 1940 and her receiving Chicago, and then kind of as you continue on through the book, you've really delicately wove these, what we all as the grander zeitgeist have these pop culture moments, but also how they tailor to your story, which we'll get to as well. So you did a very good job.
Thank you.
And it's as a reader too, kind of kicking off to kind of in the next point. I just wanted to highlight that you really could. We Are the Culture series, so just putting that nugget in there, and I'll let Anthony take it. But I'm just saying, I think there's a market for it because there's a lot of culture here.
So that is true. There's a lot.
So, as a Chicago native, and as you began working on the book, what were things that surprised you that you discovered during the process of making the book?
I think some things that really surprised me while making the book was the depths of a lot of the influence. So I think that I knew kind of a little bit of some of these things, which is, I'll give credit to the fact that like a lot of these things were things that I had already at least some of them I had reported on, and then some things I had like just kind of tangentially touched, right? So like, we were talking earlier about like, Emmett Till and his story, right? And so, we all think that we know Emmett Till's story, but I think actually in recent years, the greater amount of public, like people in the public are like knowing the details a little bit more specifically. And so I knew, for example, like, overall, the role of the media was important, right? You know, like, we know that very famous line of, you know, Mamie Till Mobley saying, like, you know, like, show the world, like, tell the world what I want everybody in this world to know what they did to my baby, right? But, like, I didn't maybe know, like, the relationships that she had kind of built with these two journalists at Jet, one who really wrote a lot of what she told them, and one who was the photographer, and how they were really with her when she first saw the body at the funeral. Like so maybe, like, some of those details I just didn't really know, right? And I knew the overall story, so, like, you know the big plot points, and you think you know the story, and then you have to write it, and then you have to make sure that you know it well, and then you have to make sure that you're saying it really accurately, and then I'm making sure that I'm really getting it the way that I say that I think I know, and then I'm reading all of the coverage in a way that, okay, so maybe I know, you know, maybe 3 years ago, 4 years ago, we all know, you know, I know that these are the names of the reporters even, but now I'm like, oh, no, I'm reading what they wrote. I'm reading the words. I'm looking up the week by week coverage. Okay, this is what happened. This is what happened. You know, like, similar to what Collaboraction did, when you are going through and you are literally looking at, like, legal documents and turning them into a play. Like, in order to do that, you have to really immerse yourself in it and make sure you understand it, because you know the weight of making sure that you tell that story correctly. I really thought I knew a lot about Ebony and Jet. I didn't really know Johnson Publishing Company had a magazine before that called Negro Digest. For some reason in my head, I had thought that Negro Digest came towards the end, and I think that's because towards the end of his life, Robert Abbott of the Chicago Defender had actually tried, like, a magazine, and it ended up not being you know, as successful as the Defender. But John Johnson, his first publication was Negro Digest, like a black version of Reader's Digest, and he had this goal, and he said, I wanted to make sure that, you know, he told NPR at some point, like, I wanted to make sure that when black people picked up this magazine, they saw something that was, like, aspirational, right? Mm-hmm. So then that made me start thinking about really not just about the journalism in it, but, like, what is it like to pick up a magazine and see faces that look like you in the ads, in the editorial, you know, like, so it's just all of these things started kind of, like, kind of gelling together, I think, in a way that even as someone who prided myself as, like, you know, oh, I know a little something about history, it was different once I started, like, really pulling things together and kind of, like, making sense of what this is supposed to mean.
History is cumulative.
Yeah.
It builds on, and if you don't know all the steps, you just kind of take it for granted that it just happened.
Yeah.
But, you know, we stand on the shoulders of many people and millions of actions that got us here.
Yeah, and all these, and I think maybe now, especially because we're kind of at a period in time where a lot of us are talking about, like, working together, right? And now, especially, that is, like, something that I'm seeing in telling the story of this book. Like, I think I also did not realize how many people knew each other, like, which would make sense, right? Like, in certain periods of times, like, people are going to be working together even in totally different fields. Like, I didn't realize, and this actually is something that I really, really probably learned after I finished the book, so it's not in the book, but, like, but I mean, the book really set me on the kind of start for a lot of this. Like Bessie Coleman, when she was trying to get her pilot's license in Chicago and she couldn't get it, the banker Jesse Binga, who has now in recent years been more in, more stories and stuff. A book came out about him. He basically, him and Robert Abbott of The Defender, they told her, like, you should really go to Europe to get your pilot's license, because I know we know you want to be a pilot and it's not working here. They're not going to let you in. Like, some black men have their pilot's license, but that's from war, and the schools aren't even letting them in, and you're a woman too, like, it's not gonna happen here. Like, you gotta go someplace else, right? And then Jesse Binga was like, matter of fact, I will pay for you to get your pilot's license, so I'll send you there, right? And so it's like, these are people who are working together in community to make stuff better for everyone. And it makes sense when you think about it that, yes, like we were just all talking together today about how, oh, do you know my friend so-and-so, and so-and-so, and it's like, yes, like we're all a degree or two apart today working together trying to make the city we love better. Why would it not be that way there? But I think hearing about that and thinking about that, it's like really inspiring to make you say, okay, no, we really got to keep working together, because that's how you get stuff done.
And it sounds like, to that point about community and communication, somebody is calling in, I believe, who wants to join in as well. Hello. Welcome to Collaboration Radio.
Hello.
Hi. Who are we speaking with?
Hi, Betty. Hi, Anthony. Hi, Arionne. Yeah, hi, Chicago. This is Aria.
This is my sister. Thanks for calling in. What did you want to share?
Oh, I just wanted to say that this is such a needed conversation. This is such a needed book, Arionne. I'm so excited to take a look at it. No, because, I have such a love for Chicago. Chicago is such a beautiful city, and it has such a vibrant culture, and it truly is the epicenter of pop culture. Mm-hmm. And so much Black culture has originated to feed into popular culture that we know today, and in all aspects of it, music, art, architecture, everything. And it's just so sad how so much of it is forgotten. Like, as you're explaining, crafting your book, how much research you have to go into to find out actual information relating to the culture of the city, when it should just be readily available. Whereas if you think of, Hollywood, story of Hollywood, story of New York, like those are already, pretty much on the forefront of people's mind. But when people think of Chicago, they don't think of, how the music scene was very influential for Hollywood, for New York. They always think of the negative when they think of Chicago, and it's really sad. Or food, everybody thinks of all the other places where Chicago is a huge epicenter for a lot of food culture as well for the rest of the United States. And it's just really awesome that this conversation is being put to the forefront in such a beautiful book like this, because a lot of people like to forget how prevalent pop culture is, and how prevalent it comes from Chicago culture.
Thank you.
Black Chicago culture.
Yeah, thank you, Aria. Do you have any comments?
Yes. No, I'm so glad that you said that. Well, for one, it's like you could have just written like the whole front of the book, because it's like almost. That's how I felt, like word for word, and that is like, in a good way, right? Like, I think I could not have written this book and not felt very appreciative. So, like, I do encourage anybody who kind of feels how I do, like maybe try to put it to words, because, like, for example, when I was trying to write about Johnson Publishing Company and I'm telling their story, then we get to the early 1970s where they have a brand new book, a brand new building come out, or is erected, and with this building, it is created by this amazing Black architect who really had like all these like really amazing kind of things that he did to the building. So like I'm reading like a landmark thing from the city about like why this building is so important. So you're like running into other stuff, but I wasn't expecting to run into that. I was just trying to fact check a line just to say in 1971 or 2 they moved into a new building. Like that's all I was trying to do, right? I was just trying to write thing, and then I'm like, oh wow, well I can't not talk about this amazing architect who designed all these things and then was the first Black man to do all this. And so it's like it just kept doing all that, which I will say is why it was overwhelming, not in a bad way, but because you just keep finding stuff and you're like, I didn't know this. I've never heard of this person's name, right? And I feel horrible for not remembering it right now, but I ran into so many stories like that where I'm like, even if this is not a like, you know, highlight of a chapter, like I need to add this in, that this is another reason why this building is so important.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Aria, for calling in.
And
Thank you.
And you get a
free
book.
Yay!
Oh, yay! Thank you so much.
And we have one more book to give away, so you might want to call in. You know, we are in such a great wave of going back and excavating history. You know, we know that the history books were written by people in power, mostly white men and institutions that you know, ultimately were usually led by rich men, most of them white, and it's a special era of, you know, excavating and rewriting or re-editing the history books, you know, and it's an important thing, and you know, the fact that you were able to do this in such a wide kind of terrain of Chicago history across so many different things is really a gift to anybody that reads the book. And I'm sure there will be others that will continue to kind of do this history correction.
Well, something that you highlighted, which kind of leads us into the next tenet, which is E for empathy, is in order to be able to tell the story, you had to understand and really do a deeper dive on that lived experience, right? And so in your book, you talk a lot about your own experience living in Chicago and being here. And, you know, I grew up with Ebony magazine. My mom had them when we'd get our, you know, hair done and stuff like that, sitting and reading through those. And my dad was a DJ in the 70s and 80s, so I grew up with a lot of 70s Soul Train music. And, you know, at the time you're just ingesting, right? You're not thinking about it. But in your book, you describe an experience where in 2003, during a dance performance, you were at FAMU, excited to show everyone what we're doing here in Chicago. You go up there with your dance team, and then your family, is that what they call it? Family?
Yes. Yep.
They did not like that.
They did not like it at the time.
And so I guess maybe, you know, in that E piece, going from that lived experience to maybe experiencing some adversity and bringing our culture to other folks, but also to your trajectory of becoming a journalist and historian. Kind of walk us through how you discovered your passion for what we're doing, and maybe through adversity even created even a bigger champion for Chicago culture.
Yeah. I feel like, and you know, everybody knows I am crazy about FAMU, and this changed definitely, but like my first month there, like I felt kind of like an alien. Like nobody dresses like me. Nobody is like it's just so different, right? And I think that people today don't maybe realize how different some pop culture was before social media, right? Like we had Black Planet, but we didn't have Facebook yet. Like when I went to college in 2003, there was no Facebook. Like Facebook came around, I remember in like 2004, and you had to wait until your school got accepted because you could only use like your school's email address to sign up, and none of us used to use our school email address, so all of us was like in the IT office, like, can you please help me with my famu.edu email? I'm trying to sign up for Facebook, right? So but with that, right, like there was no, you know, like YouTube where you see somebody dancing and you're like, oh, I love that type of dance. Did you see the dance that goes with this type of music, right? And like there wasn't a spread, there wasn't an appreciation, and so we get on stage and the house tracks come on and we start footworking and they're like, boo, what is this, boo? But that was the only time we ever got booed, because after that people were like, wait a minute, this is kind of cool. And they're moving their feet really fast. And this song is really fast. So, and I don't know if it's because of maybe whatever the song was playing, or it's because it was some Chicagoans. Like, there was always a lot of Chicagoans that go to FAMU. But from, like, maybe that second performance on, every time we started dancing, people would be like, hey, hey. So then, like, so much so, I could be walking on campus and somebody would stop me and be like, hey, you that girl that moves your feet real fast on stage. Hey. So it like went a total 180, right? But I think that it just showed me how like exposure and like sharing stories, sharing experiences, right? Like it was a place where I learned, for example, like I learned Florida dances and learned to love it. I learned to love Florida music. I love I love the regional differences that we have. So it made me kind of like really appreciate Black culture, because I know that it's not a monolith. I know that it's not the same. And I think that is something I like to bring into like how I view telling Black stories specifically, you know, because it's like all those little pieces of nuance that is just so cool and special, because it's like, yeah, no, my Florida friends don't dance like my Chicago friends, but I love it, right? Like, I'm not dancing at a Florida party how I dance here, but that's okay, right? It's a Florida party. When I'm at a Florida party, when this song comes on, this is how we dance to this song at this Florida party, right? Like, that's what you do, right? And then I'm here in Chicago and it's like, oh no, this is the house. Like, it's a different vibe, it's a different thing. And I think just appreciating all the differences, right? And it just makes you, you know, kind of see stuff and you're like, oh, this is beautiful. It's kind of like, I talked to Charlotte Draper in the book, and she was the first editor at Ebony to cook in the Ebony test kitchen that they have. And this, you know, like, so when people would send in recipes, before they would publish the recipe, Charlotte would cook the recipes. Oh, she's not just like posting, you know, publishing any recipe. She got to verify, right? But like, she would mention, you know, and this was just in regular conversation as I'm talking to her. I think we were talking about something as simple as like greens, right? Like something that you see as like normal soul food, part of like a soul food side dish that you can find anywhere that you go, right? Like, whether you order in a plate in Chicago, New York, Mississippi, Arkansas, whatever. And she would just start mentioning stuff like, well, you know, people who sent in recipes from here, they normally would add a little bit of this to this. And then people who are here, they would actually usually use this. And these people, you know, from this area, they actually like to use this kind of meat. And so it was just all these little regional differences.
It's like a cultural almanac.
Yes.
I mean, yeah, just from that one venue.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so, but she noticed because she's getting all these recipes in. So everybody's sitting in all these recipes, and it's very similar, right? It's all these things where if you taste it, you're like, oh yeah, no, it's all good. But the art of putting it together.
And that it was done here.
And it's done, right? Yeah.
So then I think going to the D piece, which is kind of a burning aspect too, as we continue on. Anthony, do you want to kind of kick off what we're going to chat about?
Yeah, the D for dialogue.
Okay.
And that's what we're doing. And you know, one of the big things that came out in reading the book is that, you know, there's no secret about the false narrative around Chicago and safety and violence. And a lot of that, you know, in my opinion, is, you know, for-profit media getting paid by leading off the evening news with the gunshots and as someone from Englewood, you know this all too well. We've talked about the film Chirac actually on this show and what a missed opportunity that was. And often Chicago is overlooked as, you know, one of the great cultural engines of America. And you know, there's something that also trickles down into the artist. And I actually think it's a good thing because our artists tend to work for decades before they get discovered. And when they do finally get known, you know, they're really masters of their craft as opposed to a flash in the pan maybe in New York.
They're not all talk. None of the artists here in any medium are all talk. Like they do the work and they back it up.
So, you know, how do we amplify you know, what has been done, what is being done, what will be done to counter those narratives about Chicago?
I think that's a really important point because, you know, like kind of what you mentioned, I think one thing that I think is also important to note is that a lot of the times the media narratives that become the biggest and spread the fastest, those people are not even from here. They don't walk our streets, you know. And I say that because I think that there is a time and a place, and it's for storytelling about pain and heartache and things, right? But it's so different when it comes from us, right? Like it comes with a different nuance. It has a different expression, right? Than someplace who knows nothing about here, and they're trying to do it. Every time that happens, they get it wrong, right? When it comes authentically from here, from, you know, people who experience it and know it best and can explain it, you know, it makes sense. And I think that it is important that we talk about the joy and the celebrations, because I like a lot of places, right? Like, and there are just a lot of cities. Most cities, in fact, they don't have what we have here. Like, I'm always shocked at, like, outside of, like, maybe, like, a DC, because they have, like, all those Smithsonian museums. You know, New York, just by the sheer size of it. But realistically, most cities do not have the types of art scene that we have. Most cities in the U.S., right? Like the fact that you can go today and see 2 to 3 different Broadway in Chicago shows. You can also go and see maybe like 4 or 5 different, like, and we're just, like, if I'm just talking about theater, right? Like, just today, on a Saturday, there are so many things, right? There's so many things happening, I cannot keep up. Like, last week, me and my friend went to go see, like, Death Becomes Her. So amazing, so good. And then, like, after that's off, and somebody's like, well, you know, now you gotta go see so-and-so. I'm like, wait, there's so-and-so, where is so-and-so? So there's, like, always a show going on, right? And then there's community shows. Then we have something that is, like, usually, like, a free stuff in all these park districts. We have all these art galleries. Like, I have looked at other cities. They do not have it. They might have, like, 1 or 2 great, lovely museums. We got museum campuses.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, the cultural richness. And you know, one city that does have it is New Orleans.
Yes. New Orleans absolutely has it, right? And so, but it's not that every city has this thing.
We got another caller. Caller number 2. You're live on Collaboration Radio.
On the dialogue.
Congratulations. You just got a free book. Who's calling?
Oh.
It's the future calling. And they're telling us we're headed in the right direction. Well, we'll see if we can find that caller. Okay. We hope that you can call back and get your free book.
Yeah, no, but I think kind of leaning into because a lot of what you you've spoken about too is kind of there's so much intersectionality, and when you have these kind of catch-all scenarios, are they back? Okay, these catch-all scenarios. It definitely prohibits the ability for folks to have that exposure to all of the positive and powerful things that are going on. Do we? Okay, so it looks like our person's going to come back.
Hi, welcome to Collaboration Radio.
Hi, thanks. Native Chicagoan here, born at Cook County Hospital, raised on the South Side. And I wanted to magnify what Arionne was saying. Chicago is a magnificent city. I've lived in San Francisco and Houston. I went to grad school in Houston. And those are wonderful cities in their own right, but they don't come close to the cultural diversity, the biodiversity. Our lakes, we have so much nature trails. You can find almost anything culturally in Chicago. I had a couple quick questions for Arionne.
We have time for research. We have time for one.
One?
Yep.
Okay. Okay. Then let me go to the second one. What was the significant cultural differences between the West and South sides, and how did redlining impact the democratic shifts within the city?
That is such a fantastic question. I will say...
And I'll let you go and sit back and listen.
And let's make sure we get your contact info so we can get you one of Arionne's books.
Yes. So one thing that changed a bit was that a lot of the stories that happened early on and that was documented, right? And I try not to forget about my West Side friends, but a lot of the earliest stories were predominantly, on the South Side, like, when we're talking about in the Black Belt, but simply because of the migration pattern. I will say, because of the fact that I tried to focus mostly on culture, I talked about redlining as part of its effect on culture, if that makes sense. So I didn't really dive as much into the democratic changes of the city, but again, because especially this book specifically was focused on pop culture influences, but I think that there are I think that the West Side is still underreported. And so I'm really hoping that we get more specific stories, like authors who are from the West Side, who have more first person stories to kind of help bolster that. A lot of my fellow authors that are just happen to be my friends are from the South Side as well. And so like you mentioned, Beverly, when we add in our personal stories, the story is not about the South Side, of course, but if I am starting a chapter with a personal essay, then I'm talking about the streets I walked on, and then it's going to feel South Side heavy. And so I hope that, more folks from the West Side, I'm sure some people are working on that. And so I'm happy to be of support of some more West Side stories, because there's some fantastic stuff going on the West Side. Because I think,
And that's really, so seamlessly a call to action, right?
Yep,
if you're on the West Side of Chicago, or if you're in underreported areas of Chicago, we want to hear your stories, and a call to action is to share them, right? Utilize platforms like Collaboration Radio and so on. And so I think for our last question, what is your call to action for the community in Chicago, so that we can embrace this history, but also carry it forward, maybe in 2 sentences? What would you say?
Yes. So my two sentence call to action is to find out how you can be of service in an area that you care about, because I think I recognize that so many of us cannot do everything. We are not necessarily the type of people who everybody's not going to be marching on the line. Everybody's also not going to maybe be working with youth, right? Some people are like the money people. Some people are the youth volunteers, right? Like, we all got to kind of play a part. Some people love the arts. Some people are the writers, the singers. Like, whatever it is, we kind of got to do it together and then come together. Let's talk about it, and then we all play our part.
Absolutely. Awesome.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It goes fast, doesn't it?
It did. Oh my gosh, I went so fast. I wish I had more time for more answers. But I know I just got to come back. Yeah.
Next week, we have Damon and Jason from Ergo, which is a wonderful podcast. I mentioned that earlier, and then we get into the kind of the summer solstice, and the summer gets really going in Chicago. There's really nothing like it.
Summertime chai.
It's just, next thing you know, it's like August 22nd, and the kids are going back to school, and you go, where did it all go?
Yes.
You know, when you only have 3 months of that summer fun, you know, it goes so fast. And do you have any special summer plans?
I'm moving to Tallahassee to work at FAMU.
Stares into camera.
Huh? I'll be back every summer. I'll be back every May through August. Don't worry. You can't
she's
get
not
rid
going
of me.
far. She's not going far.
I'm coming back. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Arionne, so much.
Thank you.
That was our
me.
show. And you can catch us live next Saturday at 4 p.m. Central. And you can listen to this podcast at WCPT, SoundCloud, and everywhere you listen to podcasts currently. And if you have more questions for Arionne, you can go to Arionne.com.
Yes.
To pick her brain some more about all the things you love about Chicago. I am Beverly.
I'm Anthony Mosley.
Thank you so much for joining us, for our callers, for calling in and getting some free books, and we'll see you next time.
That's right. Yeah. Collaboration Radio.
Heck yeah.
It's not just for breakfast.
Or it's what's for dinner.
That's right.
The preceding program, Collaboraction Radio, was sponsored by Collaboraction, and to the extent applicable, their guests. The views and opinions expressed therein do not necessarily reflect those of Heartland Signal, LLC, or its management.
Would it be crazy if you packed your bags and left?